So the last effects I want to talk to you that refer to edge effects include higher predation and brood parasitism in these edge habitats. So I mentioned before that we can have different species interactions at the edge than you might in the interior of a habitat. So classic examples are forest birds have higher rates of predation and nest predation, um, at the edges of forests. And so in smaller patches, you'll often not find some of these very forest dependent birds because things like cats um, will be more likely to get birds and kill them or injure them. There's also not as good a cover, as good as microclimates in the edges to raise nestlings in these areas. Another example is the brown-headed cowbird, which does nest parasitism. They historically would follow herds of bison and specialize on getting food as bison kicked up insects when they were grazing. So they were always moving around, so they didn't stop and couldn't raise their own nest. So they will lay eggs in the nest of another bird, and I talked about this back when we talked about parasitism. And so some forest birds don't do well if they have this parasitism because the brown-headed cowbird chicks are very large, and it can prevent the host species from actually raising any young at all, and so that can be very detrimental. And in these edge areas, are much more likely to have this brood parasitism occur. I also want to talk about the shape of these fragments. The shape can be really important. So some of these fragments end up being all edge. So if you get these really kind of wonky shapes like you see here, if you consider a certain amount to be edge habitat, you might end up with a patch that is all edge habitat and has no core areas. So what you want if you are designing a landscape and you have to have some fragmentation, you want the patches to be as round as possible because that maximizes the amount of core area in that fragment. You can get the same amount of area here. If it's long and skinny, it's not going to have any core area. And so that's really important for whether or not these fragments are having a lot of edge effects or not.